Welcome to Men, Sex, and Tantra.
Discover what your parents, porn, and religion never taught you about being a man and having extraordinary sex. Get ready to have your mind blown and your world rocked. Hello, hello. It is Men, Sex, and Tantra today. And you know who I am, Tanya Diamond, right? I hope so by now. Okay. Really enjoying some of the emails and responses I'm getting from the podcast. I really appreciate that. Yep, still looking for some male guests and some men who want to jump on and have a coaching session. Remember, you won't be seen. You can change your name. Nobody will know who you are, but it'll be interesting for everybody. I'm quite sure, and valuable to you. Today, I'd like to jump into the tantric sex. And, you know, Tanya, you say, men, sex, tantra. This is the tantra part here. All right, first of all, let's define the word tantra. No, it doesn't mean to weave, and it doesn't mean say yes to everything, and it doesn't mean anything you want it to mean. So the word tantra in its original language, Sanskrit, has about 130 meanings. A lot of nouns. For instance, a loom in which to weave on. This is what I find very amusing. So it can mean a loom, the actual item that you weave on. How in the world did Tantra get defined as weaving and this whole idea when really that's not what they were talking about in the language? They were talking about literally a loom that you weave on, not something spiritual or great sex or anything like that. No, that's one. Here's the real meaning, the actual meaning of what we do with the word Tantra. It's a treaty. It's a scientific treaty or path, specific path. So Tantra itself is not some do whatever you want to do when you feel like it. I was born tantric kind of thing. I'm sorry to those of you kind of sort of that have thought that and believe you're tantric, even though, you know, because you read a book or you just feel like you're tantric. That's not how that goes. So if you don't know, I am actually a Tantra lineage holder. What the heck does that mean? That means that I found some old guy way back in India, decades and decades ago, coming up to maybe 40 now, that actually taught me a specific series of practices that you do over and over and over again that build your ability to master energy. And after being able to do that, you're open to the energetic and not just oral transmission of his lineage and the thousands of teachers before him, but what he holds in his mind. And that you can't get orally, or it's not even written. His lineage, my lineage, was never even written about. There's no name for it because they weren't naming stuff back then. There's no name for it. There is no written stuff. Orally transmitted, energetically transmitted Tantra lineage. And then after that, there were all these schools that came about in ancient India. So different schools that had different rituals like right-handed paths and left-handed paths. But Tantra, there's only like 3% of classical Tantra that even talks about sex, and it's all related to two things. Householder sex. One of the 64 art forms for householders was learning how to have great sex, because guess what? They had arranged marriages. So they needed to learn how to create passion and intimacy and have good sex so they could stay married for a long time. How cool is that? So that was one of them, one of the 64 art forms, tantric lovemaking. And the other was one of the schools that had sex magic, using sexual, the sex act, orgasm, things like that for energy cultivation. The weird thing about that is that they didn't have sex as in desired sex. Like they would have to a ritual partner, both people had studied for years and years, to devoid themselves of base pleasure. Just think about that. Devoid themselves of the base of pleasure so they could come together sit in a certain format, which is the man cross-legged with the woman over his lap. You've seen that, I'm sure, depicted, and circulate energy that was not sexual. Right? Weird. So his organ is inside of her. She is sitting there. They're circulating it. But this is not about orgasmic energy in the sense of pleasure, having ejaculation and things like that. Very ritualized, years and years and years of studying. They would stand in front of temples with depictions of all sorts of sex acts until they no longer sexually responded to those. Then they could enter the temple. Yeah. So I get it. You're thinking, wait, what? Tantra isn't, I thought Tantra was about lasting longer and orgasms without ejaculation and, you know, hours and hours of orgasm and connection and love and stuff. That's new age stuff. That's all new age, sacred sexuality. And truthfully be told, so little of anything related to Tantra is involved in that. But Tanya, you're saying this is Tantra and you're talking about sex. Yeah, because you know what? 30 years ago, when I was trying to, tell people that what was happening here wasn't Tantra in the West, these things, were like yoni massage, lingam massage, sexual healing, everything that's being called Tantra isn't Tantra. Yeah, of course, I got booed off the stage. Who are you, Tanya? Well, who died and left you an authority? Well, my Tantra master did. But besides that, I'm that person who says you have to meet people where they are. So I also got certified in Neo-Tantra, what I call and have been calling Neo-Tantra for a long time. So finally, it's now more commonplace. You hear the word Neo-Tantra. I started that years and years and years ago. Neo-Tantra actually started about the 11th century when this businessman noticed all of the Westerners and all of these people flocking to India and Asia, because Tantra had moved over into Buddhism and other factions at that point. All of these people flocking to see the esoteric arts. And of course, then the Kama Sutra put in there, Tao, sexuality. So lots of things got kind of mishmashed together. But the big thing that was going on were these old guys who got to do things to Western women. Because they were flocking there to learn all of this stuff. And so New Age Tantra was Ayurvedic. So yoga got thrown in with Ayurvedic, got thrown in with some Taoism and some Kama Sutra and a few other things, got all mishmashed together, now became this kind of new Tantra. And it was a lucrative business. And not only lucrative business, but it was also a hotbed of predators. All these people saying that you had to have sex with the guru or master to learn Tantra. This is so funny. I come from a long line of celibate men, right? Authentic Tantra, celibate men, energy mastery, like things like regrowing limbs and raising the dead, and true energy mastery, not just sex. So this is what happened. And then, of course, as things moved and came over to the West, we have, in the 60s, we've got a few people like Osho, who actually never learned anything about Tantra, who just called himself that. Actually, he didn't call himself that. Everybody else started calling him that. And a few other old guys who came over and literally started this whole like Neo-Tantra movement here in the West, especially in the US. It was happening in Europe as well. But how do you tell the difference between Tantra and Neo-Tantra? And does it matter? Well, Tantra, really, it's a solo practice that you don't have to have, you can be celibate to practice. Sexual energy is an energy that we can all relate to. So sexual energy is a beginner energy that you can feel and respond to so that you can move past the grossness of that, not as in yucky, but as in gross as in big, to more subtle energy mastery. That's Tantra. Neo-Tantra, okay, we're all working on learning to have better sex. It's how to be more connected, how to create a spiritual sexual practice, how to sexually heal. And I think, quite frankly, it's all important. It's why I teach all of it. It's why I am a classical Tantra lineage holder. It's why I teach Neo-Tantra as well. It's why I meet you where you are. If you don't want to use the word Tantra, I'll educate you and I'll meet you where you are. In fact, I'm certifying Neo-Tantra coaches. because we need that. Because in the West now, all the Tantra that everybody's talking about is mostly like, people think, oh, I have to be polyamorous. I have to have sex with a bunch of people. I have to have a partner to practice. And none of that's true. So first of all, none of that's true. Even Neo-Tantra is awesome as a solo practice first. When I work with couples, I have each of them doing their own practices. Yeah. And then they can do practices together. Yeah. Awesome. How do we become better people, or more whole, or more joy-filled, or more passionate? That's what I'm all about. And wherever it is that I have to meet somebody in that space, I'm happy to do that. Most people are never going to learn classical Tantra. In fact, my teacher before he died was like, look, these old practices like washing your guts out in the Ganges River and a bunch of other weird stuff that they used to do, it's not pertinent anymore. It's not needed anymore. And in fact, in today's, the way modern nervous systems is, and this was like 4 years ago, so you could see what was coming. The old practices, ancient practices aren't going to work anymore. So I've been restructuring ancient practices for a few decades now, because the things you read in the book were built for people who had a different nervous system than you do, had different technology than you do, were more grounded than you do. So some of these old practices that you may have been trying, reading Mantak Chia, reading Charles Muir, reading Margot Anand, if you're reading all these books that have ancient practices and they aren't working for you, feel me here, it's not your fault. They weren't designed for dysregulated nervous systems. Yep, you might get a little relief, or you might get a little sustainability, or you might get a little change. But if you can't sustainably, permanently create the change you want, it kind of comes and goes, things get weird. That's why, not your fault. And it's really sad to think, I mean, I'm saying something, you guys are totally understanding me. Something that was created for people that were grounded, so grounded that the reason that we had those practices was to give them hope to reach the heavens, be a totally different practice than for people who are already in their heads, out of their minds, technologically so disconnected from nature by tech, that we would do the same practice. Doesn't even make sense. Okay. So there's a little bit of spiel. And what is tantric sex then? Let's say, what is tantric sex? Nowadays, tantric sex could be something where it is that you understand yourself in a way that you're grounded and your nervous system is calm and your sexuality isn't tied up in past trauma, or you're not in your head, you're not in performance mode, and you're able to communicate well, and you're able to connect with your whole body, not just your heart, not just your head, not just your crotch, but your whole body. And you were able to connect with another person in that way, meaning that if you were having sex and one of you said, hey, this isn't doing it for me right now, the other person would go, okay, great. What is there anything that I can do or that we should do? What would you like to do now? And the other person said, I'm not sure. Can we just cuddle? Yeah, sure. And then a minute later, the first person who said, I'm not doing it, says, well, is there something I could do for you right now, maybe? And you're like, yeah, no, it's cool. Cuddling is good. That's tantric sex. Being with whatever is happening in the moment without trying to shift it, change it, manipulate it, perform it, being able to be cool with what is actually happening without fear, anxiety, unagreed upon expectations, and arrangements. Yeah, wow. Tantric sex. Usually there's a lot of laughing. There's some fun. Yes, there's times when it's like, whoo, seeing the heavens. But every time you have sex, make love, be with somebody that knows enough about Tantra and Neo-Tantra, it's going to be different. It's not all sitting meditating with candles. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that was okay. Great to connect with you. Let's do something different. It's life. It's texture. It's about what's happening right now. So can we all take the pressure off whatever it is. And for God's sakes, guys, if you're the dude that says to somebody, yes, I know Tantra, now you know that you probably don't. Hate to burst that bubble. And if you're like, yeah, hey, I have tantric sex, and you tell somebody that actually knows what that means, you better be prepared for that isn't necessarily that you can last forever if she's not into it or they're not into it. And it may mean a whole bunch of things, like that person saying to you, yeah, I like you, I dig you right now, but I'm not into this part. Let's figure something else out. Okay, love to know what you thought about all that. And I'll talk more on, the bright side, some of the things that actually, when you understand breath work and other things, can work on the next episode.